What if the greatest threat to your power isn't the enemy who hates you, but the friend who smiles too much? In this video, we unravel the true danger of the overly sociable, those whose charm is not a virtue, but a weapon. You will learn how they manipulate, how they rise, and, most importantly, how to neutralize them. Observe the crowd, and you will find the predator not cloaked in fangs or fury, but in friendliness. He flatters, laughs, nods. He mirrors your desires while quietly shaping them. It is not with force that he conquers, but with attention. Not by demanding loyalty, but by appearing to offer it. These are the most dangerous players in the game of power. The sociable. Not because they are likable, but because they know that likability is the most effective disguise for ambition. Tonight, we lift the mask. Power rarely announces itself. It whispers, it smiles. It enters the room with charm, not chains. You have been taught to fear the brute, the tyrant with the loud voice, the fist on the table. But that is not the true danger. No. The real threat sits beside you, grinning, agreeable. They listen more than they speak. They remember your birthday. Have you ever met someone so charismatic, so effortlessly pleasant, that you let your guard down without knowing why? That is no accident. That is camouflage. The sociable predator understands one simple truth: people do not resist what they find familiar and flattering. Charm, then, becomes the cloak under which ambition hides its blade. Consider Caesar. Not Julius, but his heir. Octavian, the man who would become Augustus. He did not seize Rome with noise. He seduced it. While others clashed swords in the Forum, he wrote letters, built alliances, smiled. And when the dust settled, the Republic was dead, and he was emperor. He was not feared until it was too late. That is the art of charm. Psychology reveals what princes have always known: humans are wired for reciprocity. If someone is kind, we feel compelled to trust. If they flatter us, we drop our defenses. This instinct, designed to build communities, is now weaponized by those who understand it. They are not sociable for your benefit. They are sociable to study you, to embed themselves. They ask about your work, your worries, your wins. They smile, they nod. But each reaction you give is a data point. Each confession you make is a thread they'll pull when the time is right. They are not building rapport. They are mapping your soul, and still, you believe them. Why? Because charm feels warm. It coats the dagger in honey. You see, the sociable predator does not reveal their intent. They do not speak of goals, only of shared interests. They blur the line between ally and observer. And by the time you realize you've been maneuvered, you're already where they wanted you. Let me ask you, have you ever been pushed into a decision without pressure? A job you took because everyone said it was perfect for you. A friend you trusted, who later used your words as leverage. These are not coincidences. They are strategic social victories. Modern psychology calls it the liking principle. We comply more with those we like. But what it often forgets to say is this: liking can be manufactured. A well-placed compliment, a shared enemy, a laugh at the right moment. These are not mere social gestures. They are weapons, if wielded with precision. In Florence, I watched merchants and nobles alike fall not to force, but to friendliness. A warm host could do more than an armed envoy. A shared meal could open more gates than a battering ram, because charm bypasses suspicion. It makes you want to be used. Think about that. We guard ourselves against those who show ambition, but we open our homes to those who simply appear kind. So what is charm then? It is the most elegant form of aggression. The sociable predator uses it not to connect, but to conquer, softly, slowly, and without resistance. They know that control gained without a fight is the most stable of all, because it feels voluntary. And yet, once under their influence, you begin to act differently. You echo their phrases. You adopt their opinions. You defend them even when your instincts protest. By then, the camouflage has worked. You've invited the lion to dinner and handed it the key to your room. But how do you identify such a predator? How do you separate genuine warmth from calculated charm? You must stop asking what they say and start asking why they say it. Interrogate the smiles. Measure the timing. Observe what they ask and what they never reveal. And when someone seems too agreeable, too attuned, too perfect, ask yourself, are they a friend or a strategy? Because in the game of power, the most dangerous players never look like players at all. They look like allies. They look like you. And once they're close enough, they don't need a sword. They only need a word. But charm alone is not their only weapon. There is something far more dangerous than likability. Something quieter, colder, more enduring. Information. What do you reveal when you speak? Every sigh, every pause, every careless confession at the edge of trust. It becomes a currency, and someone is always collecting. The sociable predator does not hunt with violence. They hunt with curiosity. Not the loud kind, not the obvious kind, but the disarming curiosity of the good listener. The one who remembers the name of your childhood pet, but never tells you where they grew up. Let me ask you, have you ever walked away from a conversation realizing you did all the talking? That you spilled your fears, your frustrations, your future plans. And yet, you learned almost nothing in return. That was not a dialogue. That was a harvest. The sociable predator understands one thing above all: power belongs to those who know more. Because knowledge, real knowledge, is leverage. In the courts of Renaissance Italy, the sharpest minds were not on the battlefield. They were in the drawing rooms, smiling, complimenting, listening. They'd offer a drink. They'd nod as you spoke. And while you believed you were being heard, you were, in fact, being studied. Your alliances, your appetites, your insecurities, all filed away. Not for today. For the day it matters. This is no different now. Today, the predator wears a colleague's badge, a friend's face. They don't need a blade. They need access. And access is bought with attention. Psychologists call it emotional mirroring. When someone seems to reflect your feelings, you open up. You mistake resonance for trust. But behind the nod, there may be no empathy, only calculation. You see, they're not interested in your feelings. They're interested in your patterns. What breaks you? What drives you? What tempts you? That is the true profile they build, not the person you claim to be, but the one you accidentally expose. Have you ever watched a manipulator at work? They rarely ask direct questions. Instead, they invite you to fill silence. They drop vague comments and let you rush to correct them. And in doing so, you hand over clarity. They say, "You must be so busy lately." And you reply, "Actually, I've been swamped since the new promotion." Now they know. Now they have detail. They say, "I heard you and Sarah were really closer." You respond, "We were, but she crossed a line." Now they have division. Each word you offer, a thread they can tug. Because information in the right hands is not just insight. It is ammunition, used cleverly. Your own words can be turned against you. A well-timed revelation. A private comment shared publicly. A truth twisted just slightly. In politics, this is standard warfare. In friendships, it becomes betrayal. But in both cases, the root is the same: you spoke, and they stored, and they waited. That is the key. Patience. The sociable predator is not impulsive. They are archivists. They collect, categorize, and calculate. They'll pretend to forget. They'll act surprised when you bring it up again. But rest assured, they never forgot. They simply filed it under useful later. Consider this. Why do scandals often erupt years after the original offense? because someone waited, because someone knew, and chose the perfect moment to strike. Your secrets are safest when unknown. But once shared, they become bargaining chips. And the more charming the listener, the more dangerous the silence afterward. So ask yourself, who in your life knows too much? Who always listens but never reveals? Who makes you feel heard but rarely seen? They may not move against you today. They may not need to. Because true power doesn't require action. It requires positioning. And information is the perfect tool for that. It doesn't bruise. It doesn't bleed. But it binds. It lets them predict you, influence you, control you, all without ever raising their voice. Now imagine this. Someone who has spent months gathering your habits, your values, your weak points, and then, suddenly, they begin to guide your decisions, not with force, but with well-placed suggestions. They know exactly when to push, when to pause, when to disappear, just long enough for you to come chasing. Because now, you don't just trust them. You need them. But how do they do it? What invisible strings are they pulling while they play the role of friend, advisor, confidante? It's not what they say. It's how they make you act. Influence. The quietest form of domination. It doesn't shout, it echoes. When the sociable predator wishes to lead, they do not command. They agree. You speak your mind, and they nod. You share your doubts, and they share the same ones. You declare a belief, and they finish your sentence with perfect alignment. And so, you trust them. But make no mistake, they're not echoing to flatter you. They're echoing to guide you. Because influence, in its most powerful form, feels like autonomy. You think you're deciding. You think the idea is yours. But it was planted, gently, invisibly, by someone who never raised their voice. Have you ever noticed how some people always seem to agree with the room? How they seem to support everyone's ideas, yet somehow steer the conversation in their own favor? That's not compromise. That's strategy. In diplomacy, we call it mirroring. In psychology, we call it social mimicry. In power, we call it infiltration. When a predator wants to enter your mind, they don't break in. They take the shape of your thoughts. They reflect your language, your rhythm, your reasoning, until their influence feels like your own reflection. And once your ego sees itself in another, it becomes loyal. Blindly so. This tactic is ancient. Recall Alcibiades, the charming Athenian politician who could make Spartans feel like he was one of them, then return to Athens and convince them he'd never left. He aligned with whoever held power. He echoed their values. And with each echo, he advanced. He didn't need loyalty, he just needed belief. Belief that he believed in you. And that is the key. The sociable predator rarely offers original ideas. They offer refined versions of yours. They let you speak. Then they agree, amplify, and subtly bend your views, until you're walking toward their goal, on a path you believe you chose. This isn't flattery, it's calibration. Psychologically, we are drawn to what reflects us. Similarity effect makes us feel safer with those who validate our worldview. But validation is not always kindness. Sometimes it's conquest. Now ask yourself, have you ever felt understood too quickly? Did someone ever finish your thoughts before you did? And it felt effortless. That wasn't connection. That was precision engineering. They studied you, they adapted. They became the shape of your shadow. And in doing so, they earned your trust, your attention, and eventually your obedience. Yes, obedience. Because when someone echoes you enough times, you begin to listen for their approval. You hesitate before disagreeing. You second-guess your instincts if they frown. You seek their smile, as if it validates your existence. At that point, they no longer need to lead. You follow voluntarily. They become the silent governor of your choices. Watch closely. The sociable predator never directly pushes. They suggest. They gently propose. They ask questions that imply direction. Have you considered? Wouldn't it be better if? You've always said you value honesty. So what would that look like here? You hear your own values refracted back at you, but the shape has changed, and you follow it, because it feels like your idea. This is not persuasion. This is puppetry hidden behind flattery. And here's the brilliance. If you ever confront them, they'll smile and say, "But it was your choice." Of course it was, because they made sure you felt it was. In courtrooms, boardrooms, bedrooms, this tactic rules. Not the loudest voice, not the most intelligent, but the one who echoes first, adapts fastest, and leaves no trace of their original intention. Now reflect. Who in your life always seems to be on your side? Who mirrors you so perfectly it feels uncanny? That is not necessarily loyalty. That may be leverage, if that was the lie. And the more they reflect you, the more they own the version of you they've created. By the time you notice, you'll be defending their influence as if it were your own belief. That's not friendship. That's a redesign of your identity. But there's one more layer. One more tactic, more subtle than charm, more dangerous than influence. Not what they give you, but what they withhold. Warmth is a weapon. Few recognize this until it is too late. You've been taught to associate manipulation with coldness, with harsh words, with visible cruelty. But the most effective control comes wrapped in comfort. The smile that lowers your defenses, the laugh that buys your trust, the soft hand that subtly guides your steps toward their goal, not yours. And by the time you feel the weight of the leash, you've convinced yourself you asked for it. You didn't. You were conditioned. Let us not speak in abstractions. Let us speak of truth. There are those who command loyalty not through fear, but through calculated affection. They learn your needs, your hopes, your hunger for validation. They offer it generously. They become your greatest supporter, your loyal echo, your emotional refuge. But it is not generosity, it is investment. They are buying your dependence. Because what is a dependent mind? A controllable one. This strategy is not new. Kings have used it. Courtesans mastered it. And in the halls of power, it is the oldest game in play. Consider Louis XI of France. He was not beloved because he ruled with justice. He was beloved because he learned how to appear just. He smiled. He gifted. He praised. Until his enemies were tangled in his web of goodwill. Then he struck. He understood that warmth creates expectation. Expectation leads to emotional debt. And debt, especially emotional debt, is a form of servitude. Now look around you. Who controls you not through force, but through approval? Who disappears when you displease them, only to return with affection once you submit? This is not friendship. It is a cycle of reinforcement and withdrawal. In psychology, we call it intermittent reinforcement. It's how gamblers become addicted, and it's how manipulators train you to crave their attention. When they're kind, you feel elevated. When they're distant, you feel hollow. And so, you learn to please them, just to feel whole again. But here's the Machiavellian truth. They knew this from the start. Their kindness was never unconditional. It was calculated, measured, and precisely delivered. Not to give you comfort, but to make you need them. Because the person you depend on emotionally becomes the one who controls your behavior silently. You modify your words around them. You weigh your choices based on their reactions. You fear their absence more than their anger. And they never have to raise their voice. They just leave the room and let your imagination do the rest. That is power, a power built not on strength, but on strategic warmth. You see, most people imagine control as domination. But the clever know it can be engineered through attachment. Make someone feel seen. Make them feel special. Then step back, just slightly. Watch them chase the version of you that once made them feel alive. It is not love. It is leverage. And it works because most people do not question kindness. They question cruelty. They resist aggression. But kindness, they accept it without suspicion, even when it is structured like a trap. Let me ask you, have you ever felt like you owe someone emotionally, but can't explain why? Like they were too understanding, too present, too good to be true? You may have mistaken strategy for sincerity, because when warmth is wielded by a predator, it is no longer a virtue. It is camouflage. And once you rely on that warmth to feel whole, you begin to shape yourself to preserve it. You agree more. You reveal more. You become smaller, so that they can remain the sun around which you orbit. But remember this, no sun shines endlessly. And when their light disappears, you will feel cold. Not because they withdrew, but because they trained you to depend on it. That is the ultimate act of control. No threats, no violence, only absence, used like a knife. So, what can you do? How do you break free from the influence of someone who never raised a hand, but still holds you captive? It begins with seeing warmth not as safety, but as a possible strategy. There is one final tactic more cunning than charm, more invisible than influence, and more suffocating than silence. It is the predator's greatest illusion, harmlessness. The sociable predator knows the truth. You fear those who show power, not those who hide it. You prepare for a storm, but never the slow erosion of trust, draped in smiles and casual laughter. Ask yourself, would you suspect the threat that never interrupts, never disagrees, never competes? That's the brilliance of the harmless mask. It softens suspicion. It invites disclosure. It disarms the vigilant. But beneath this mask, calculations continue. Silent, relentless, precise. Let us speak of history. Talleyrand, the diplomat who survived the guillotine, Napoleon, and the Bourbon Restoration, was not feared because of his speeches. He was feared because he said so little. He moved through courts as a crippled man with a gentle voice. No one saw him as a threat, until it was too late. He played the role of harmless, and from that role, he reshaped empires. This is the sociable predator's final act. They vanish into the background, until they become the background. Not a rival, not a leader, but a presence so familiar, so non-threatening, that you never question it. They adopt softness as armor. They speak in self-deprecating tones. They present themselves as incompetent, indecisive, or just happy to help. You lower your guard, thinking you are the dominant one. But what if you're not? What if every choice you've made was quietly influenced by the one who seemed least capable? In psychology, this tactic has a name, the pratfall effect. When someone appears slightly flawed, slightly vulnerable, we trust them more. It's counterintuitive, but that's what makes it so dangerous. The predator understands this, so they fumble a little, laugh at themselves, act surprised when praised. They don't dominate you, they let you dominate them, and in doing so, they become invisible, essential, untouchable, because no one accuses the harmless one. Think back. Have you ever dismissed someone as harmless, only to realize they knew everything, that they were always present in your most vulnerable moments, that they quietly advised, softly agreed, and now hold all the keys? This is the long game. It's not about speed. It's about placement. They don't need to climb. They let others rise, then position themselves underneath, like the root beneath the tree. You grow tall, they grow deep. And when the time comes, they're already entangled in everything that sustains your power. It's not a coup, it's dependency. This strategy is difficult to detect because it flatters your ego. You feel superior, smarter, more capable. You don't fear them, you pity them. And in that illusion, they thrive. Because you'll never strike a threat you do not see. But here's the brutal truth. The sociable predator wants you to underestimate them. They want to be forgotten in the power structure. They want you to speak freely in their presence because no one filters themselves around the harmless. They become your confessor, your confidant, your unthreatening echo. And when you fall, they remain, unaffected, unblamed, ready to take what you left behind. You see, when the predator hides behind harmlessness, they can afford infinite patience. They never need to attack. They only need to outlast you, because power does not always conquer. Sometimes it absorbs. So now ask yourself, who in your life plays the fool too perfectly? Who is always just watching, just helping, just listening? They may not seek the crown today, but they are holding the map to the throne. And the more harmless they appear, the more dangerous they become. Because when the sociable predator stops pretending, you won't be ready. But there is a way to expose them. There is a final filter, a technique that unmasks even the most careful manipulator. One test, one shift, one trap. The most effective control is the kind they thank you for. No chains, no commands. Just suggestion, approval, silence. You don't dominate them. You let them choose your will, thinking it was their own. This is the highest form of manipulation, when your presence shapes decisions without needing permission. When influence becomes invisible. And remember, the most dangerous predator is not the one who growls. It's the one who listens. So ask yourself, who controls you, and how long has it gone unnoticed? Comment your thoughts below. Expose the strategies you've seen, or the ones you've used. Subscribe if you seek to understand power not as the world pretends it is, but as it truly functions. And share this with those who still believe kindness is always innocent. It may be the only warning they get. Until next time, trust nothing at face value. And remember, those who control the crowd rarely stand in front of it.